Hey, Inspired Moneymaker. Today's guest went from money moron to financial rock star, and he wants to help all of us. If you want to do better with your money, you're going to enjoy this episode. Episode 224 features Scott Alan Turner, financial rock star and self-made millionaire.
You can look rich on the outside, and people you don't know might think that's cool. But what's cooler, here's what I'm driving. I have a 2007 Honda Fit. It's got 160,000 miles on it. It's the junkiest car, usually, when I'm pulling into the Walmart parking lot. And I want people to get to this mindset of, don't pull into the parking lot looking at other people's cars. Pull into the parking lot, and in the back of your mind, know you got so much money in the bank, you could go out and buy every single car in that parking lot with a stroke of a check.
I'm Andy Wong, host of the Inspired Money podcast and financial advisor at Runnymede Capital Management. Our guest is Scott Alan Turner. He went from living paycheck to paycheck, losing $40,000 in the stock market, and racking up credit card debt to self-made millionaire by age 35. We can learn a lot from his turnaround story. You may know him from his Financial Rockstar podcast with Scott Alan Turner, CFP, his YouTube channel, and blog. He's on a mad mission to help people get ultimate happiness, financial freedom, and live life full of awesome experiences. In this episode, you'll learn why looking successful doesn't necessarily mean success, learning to make sacrifices in your life to have bigger things later on, and learn what it means to live an awareness lifestyle. Now let's get inspired with Scott Alan Turner. Scott, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Andy. Glad to be here.
Let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
Well, I talk about, in my own life, I've worked forever, what seems like. So when I was growing up, we rented an apartment above, it was a two-family apartment, and the landlord was going out of town for vacation with his kids, and he paid me to scoop his dog's dog doo around the yard. paid me a little bit of money for that. So I think that was my first ever job in the world, and that's kind of, I would say I was 7 years old at the time, 6 or 7. That's my earliest memory of earning money and sticking that in a little metal box that my dad got me. We didn't have a piggy bank; it was just a metal box.
Well, I like the early willingness to work. And it seems like once you're scooping dog doo for money, you can only go up from there.
Yeah. It is crazy. Nowadays, we just moved out of North Dallas pre-COVID, and I remember seeing the trucks that would drive around the neighborhood. It was a very, very large neighborhood. And nowadays, these guys would have the companies and the businesses that would show up at the neighbor's yard and scoop up their dog's mess. And that was like a legit business. And they always had the funny names on the side of the trucks, like Doggy Duty or something like that. And it was crazy. You can do anything for money nowadays.
And points for creativity. Yeah, and yes. The naming of the business. So I'm excited to have you on the show. You're the financial rock star. You've called your sort of previous self a money moron. And I want to talk about your evolving definition of wealth.
Sure.
Like you talked a little bit about like that first job as a kid, but paint a picture of what life was like growing up. I think that was in Massachusetts. Like what money lessons did you get from your parents?
I would say like most kids, none. You know, that was a dramatic pause there for silence. My dad, he worked for the town. Mom raised 5 kids. After I was the youngest of 5, so after my brothers and sisters moved away, she worked for a diner part-time. And dad was blue collar, very, very small town. Nobody had any money except for the one attorney in town. That's all I remember. Is like everybody else kind of dressed the same, acted the same, did the same stuff, except for the one daughter of the attorney. She always seemed like to have the nicest clothes in town. So that was what I remembered. My parents never owned a home. Always bought used cars, didn't have credit cards. My dad didn't have a 401k, he had a pension through the town. I got one lesson about money growing up, and that was you should save your money. And being a kid, what did I want to do? Like most kids, like I just want to buy candy. And I remember how to ride my bike down to the candy store every day, buying candy and blowing it on skateboards and bicycles. So as soon as I got out of that town and got off to college, it's like, oh yeah, now I'm free. Now I can really blow some money.
Well, saving is a pretty important lesson. When you look at the savings numbers in America, not that impressive. So at least that is something.
It is, yes. So if you read the studies, which of course you do, people in their mid-40s they don't have two nickels to rub together, most people. And then people in their 50s woefully unprepared for the retirement that they're going to be facing. And then you got the sadder stories of the people. You ask them, what's your retirement plan? Well, I'm just going to work till I'm dead. Not much of a plan, and certainly not the way I want to live my life, or you want to live your life, or the people that we're trying to inspire around here on your show. That's not a great option, even though a lot of people accept it as truth. If you've got time, any amount of time, a basic fundamental understanding of money and saving, you can have more than that, and there's better things out there for you.
So you mentioned that you went off to college, you got out of your hometown and saw new things. You graduated, you got a good job. An outside observer might say that you succeeded. Where your parents always rented, you were a young single guy out of school, you bought a house, you had a nice car. You made it.
I think that's the perception that the media gives us, and especially TV or unreality TV, because I watch those shows too. I know what's going on with the Kardashians. It's the perception of, okay, on the outside, everything looks amazing. And you're right, I had a fancy car. I had lifestyle creep, looking back on it, is what that was. As my salary increased, as I got promoted, as I made more money, I got bigger apartments, and then another bigger apartment. I was blowing all my money on rent, and then buying a Porsche. Well, the bank owned the Porsche. I mean, I paid the bank to drive it around, but I had an $800 a month car payment on that thing. So I looked successful, and in reality, I did not have a dime to my name. Just paying money towards other people's debts, the people in the apartment complex and the bank for the car. And then for some strange reason, well, I know the reason, my coworker came to me one day and said, Scott, I'm buying a house. And we're kind of on the same level of salary. And being a kid who grew up always living in an apartment, the same place until I went off to college, I never realized I could buy a house. It never even crossed my mind until she came to me one day and says, I'm buying a house. And then my mind automatically clicked, well, if you can buy a house, certainly I can buy a house because we're on the same level. And then I talked to my boss about it, and he said, yeah, you should buy as much house as the bank will let you. And I took that as the gospel truth, not knowing about loans. So I went out and got almost the biggest mortgage as I possibly could. And so now I have a really expensive car and a really expensive mortgage and $0 in savings. And to compound that, I decided I should go out and finance some furniture too, because that's the American way.
0% down.
Yes. It was one of those no plans.
12 months.
Yeah. Now I tell people, no, don't get one of those. It's no payment, no money down, no interest for 12 months. And no, that's a bad idea.
It's funny because probably back around that time, like my parents always taught me, don't use credit, use cash, save your money. And it was sometime in the probably late 90s, maybe early 2000s. My dad got fed up. He said, every time I go to the store, they're offering 0% interest. I'm going to buy myself a giant TV because the savers are not being rewarded here. He's like, I can afford it, but I'm going to take that TV and then pay it in 24 months. He's like, I'm going to take advantage of this and get the giant TV. But yeah, I guess if you do that too much, that becomes a problem.
For people who are poor at money management, then yeah, that become a problem. Some people, they're very strategic and they will have the calendar out. Normally they're math nerds because they've worked it out. It's like, okay, I can have 0% interest on this. I can make a 0.25% interest in my savings account. So if I do this, after 2 years, I will have made like $35. And for some people, that's like important to them. For me, it's like, nowadays, no. I don't think I'll do that. I'll just pay for the cash. But yeah, it can certainly be workable. It's almost like credit card reward points. If you pay the credit cards off each month, you're going to charge that money anyways. And I've been in the never, never debt crowd. My wife and I went credit card free for a period of time. It was great. Accumulated a bunch of cash. It's crazy how much you'll save when you get off credit cards. And now we're back to travel rewards, travel hacking. We're going to spend this money anyways, charge it to the credit card, but we pay them off in full each month. So I think people can go through different stages depending on where you are in your situation and how disciplined and how your habits are with money.
How big was this house that you were living in and filling up with furniture as a single guy?
So single, bachelor, 3-story house. It was 2,000 square feet, 2,200, furnished, and then the full basement, which was not built out yet, was unfinished. Had a beautiful backyard. There's a creek running through the backyard. Oh, it was beautiful. I look back on that house. I still envy my first house.
Was there a period where you sat in this house and you felt successful?
I think so. About the same time, I'll call it, I had my money awakening. I was a money moron. I got in the house, and along with the house came a 40-minute commute each day to my job, which I didn't have before. I used to live a few miles away in an apartment. And there on a billboard on the road to my job was an advertisement for a radio program by consumer advocate Clark Howard. I live back in Atlanta, and he's still on the radio today. I mean, that dude is, I think he's approaching 70. So I just decided, all right, I'm driving all this time. I'll tune into this guy. And he started talking about concepts I had never heard of in my life. Budgeting, emergency fund, investing, saving for the future, saving money around the house on heating bills. And since we're recording this in winter now, and they're talking about 25% increases in home heating bills this winter. So even stuff back then. That resonated with me. Shopping around for insurance. I didn't know anything about that stuff. Paying cash for a car or buying a junker. And then he would talk about, if you don't have any savings, you don't have an emergency fund. He was also the one I learned about the no plan from after I'd already filled up the house with furniture. And it resonated with me. And I realized one day, holy cow, I am just an accident waiting to happen. I don't have a backup plan. I don't have any savings. I'm a single income. If I can't pay for this house, my parents don't have any money. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I made the almost instantaneous decision. It took me about a week. I was like, I got to get rid of this car. Unloaded it, took a massive hit because I'd only owned it for about a year. So I lost a ton of money on it. But along with getting rid of that car, I got rid of an $800 a month car payment. And then I was able to go out and pay $6,350 for a used beat up junky pickup truck, but I didn't have a car payment anymore. And then I just started throwing every spare dollar I could at my mortgage. And that was really, I say that was almost the turning point in my financial life from, hey, we're freeling, we're blowing everything on money and have no savings at all, to now I'm super frugal, Scott. I'm not going to spend money on anything. I'm just going to get out of debt as quickly as I possibly can and pay down this house, which I put as little down as I possibly could.
You kind of put yourself through this Clark Howard University, like
yes.
Educating yourself about money and I guess really redefining what wealth or financial happiness looks like for you. Were you drawn to the fact that I think that Clark retired at age 31 or something? Mm-hmm. Were you drawn to that?
You're right on that story. He owned a travel business, sold it, and he was doing nothing. Got invited on the radio to do a travel show, and that morphed into his personal finance show. And listening, I don't know what it was about him that resonated with me the most. We were both in Atlanta. He was very well respected and well known. As I ended up working with a financial advisor later on, and I think he put it best. He said, Clark is a straight shooter. He's not selling products. He doesn't take any endorsements. He's never done a single advertisement in his life because he had financial freedom and he had money. So he didn't have to have those things to finance his own lifestyle. He was just out there doing his second act and helping people. And I think people like that. they're more trustworthy because they don't have any ulterior motive. It's like, you can do what I say or don't, but I'm going to go out and eat steak and lobster this weekend or not, one way or the other. It's got, your decisions may have no bearing on my life. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty drastic when you listen to a guy on the radio and you're willing to part with your Porsche and kind of eat the loss, right? Because it was I'm guessing it was a new car, and the depreciation was, how difficult was it to say, I'm selling this car, I'm gonna lose X dollars?
Oh, it was incredibly tough. I remember I put an ad wherever I ended up putting it, and the first people came and they showed up and they offered me like way less than I was asking for it. So I said no. Then the next people came and showed up and they offered me even less. It's like, man, that's a big hit. And I ended up taking the third offer on it, which was, I think, less than the previous two. So it was incredibly painful. I still miss that car. I mean, it was fun to drive. And so you have to be willing to make sacrifices in your life to have bigger things later on. And I share that with people who I'm coaching or talking to now. The same thing. We can't, Paula Pant, who's a great quote on this, is like, you can't afford everything, but you can afford anything. Does that make sense? So you can have some cool things, but you just can't have every cool thing. And that was one of the cool things that I had to give up in order to have sanity, being able to sleep well at night, and being able to have an emergency fund so that if worst case scenario, I could continue to pay on this house.
So it sounded like you sacrificed the car to pay down the mortgage debt so that you could build an emergency fund. I would imagine you can sleep a little bit better at night because you're not worried about losing your job or something going awry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like to say I traded in a car for a house.
At what point do you move out of that house?
When I met my future bride-to-be, which that would have been a few years later, which is interesting because after I left that job that I was at and I went to a new job, and I survived 5 rounds of layoffs at that job. The first round, half the company was asked to leave. And then the next round, I was in IT. It's like, all right, you got 50 developers. And then now you've got 25. And then we went through another. Now you've got 12 developers around. And then we were 6. And at one point, there was like 3 or 4 of us. And there was a running joke after a couple, 3 rounds. It's like, if a random meeting was called at any time and Scott was in the room, you were almost guaranteed to not get fired. Because I had made it through all these rounds of layoffs. And just some career advice for people that are listening: show up 5 minutes early and be the last one out of the office. And it doesn't even matter what kind of job you do during the day; you can survive layoffs that round. It's just a perception of working hard. I did work hard, but it was just a perception that people had. So a few ended up marrying my wife Katie. She lived in a townhouse, which was 45 minutes away, a couple miles from where she worked. And at the time I was working from home. So I ended up selling my house and moving into her place just after we got married.
This is very early on. Like, there weren't blogs or podcasts that you could listen to, I don't think, about financial freedom. Just it seemed early for minimalism too, because knowing your story, you're kind of like the accidental minimalist pretty early on too.
Yeah, we had books, we had radio programs, and then we had, I won't really call them seminars, but occasionally, at least in Atlanta, I remember going to one of these shows, we'll call it, and Clark Howard spoke. I think Dave Ramsey was there and Sue Zorman. So the big 3, and it was a 3-4 hour show. This is way early on before any of them were super huge, but they all spoke in regards to personal finance. And that's what we had to educate ourselves. Go out and read some books, listen to some radio programs, and that was kind of it. That's what we had to go on. There's no one you could talk to about money. no Facebook groups or anything like that, or YouTube videos. You had to kind of DIY it yourself and figure it out and see what worked for you.
You're very transparent in sharing your own story, like the weaknesses, the mistakes that you've made. Do you think, well, a couple of things stand out to me, and that's that you say that it's really common sense, that a few simple steps can make all the difference. Also, anyone can do it, and it's never too late. Mm-hmm. Do you think your approach, especially in the early days, even now, like, is it extreme or is it just very small differences?
So personal finance, what I've found out, and I've been in the industry myself now for 8 years, and some of my views have changed during that time. I've been in the never, never debt crowd. I'm familiar with the OPM crowd, other people's money, leverage everything, don't own anything yourself. And most people end up somewhere there in the middle. And we really have to put the personal back in personal finance, because the cookie cutter advice that we've all been fed and are familiar with, it really doesn't work when you start working with people one-on-one. It's like, okay, I like this thing over here. It's almost like cooking. We could all go to the grocery store and pick out 4 frozen meals and live off those forever. But the first thing people do is, all right, I'm going to take this meal and then we're going to bring it home. Let me just throw a little Tabasco sauce on it as well. Or, you know what? I like this frozen meal, but it's got black olives. Let's take those off. And they don't start following the plan. And my own views have morphed over the years of doing this. I used to be a particular way with debt and savings. And as I've grown, I paid more attention to what is most important in people's lives is, when it comes down to it, what makes you happy. And it's different for everybody. Some people, they want the freedom to travel, and that's really going to make them happy. Some people, they want to spend more time with their family, and that's going to make them happy. Some people are in killer careers, and they can never see themselves retiring to anything else, and that's going to make them happy. And it's different for everybody. And what I found, even looking back on my parents and my own upbringing, is we didn't talk about that. I don't think they knew what that was. I still don't think my mom, whose dad passed away, but mom knows what that is. And it's really hard to figure out too. You're not going to do it in a weekend. Some people, it takes a decade. I'm still working on it myself. I've been on this journey 4 or 5 years. And when you have some idea of what that is, I mean, that's really when the joy kicks in, and then the finances are what support that going forward.
When it comes to contentment and that happiness, do you think that's changed a lot for you from like the 25-year-old you versus today?
Yes. And here's the reason. Back in my corporate life, so my friend who I had mentioned earlier, the one who said, no, I'm going to buy a house. Like, I used to be super selfish and super self-centered, and it was all about me. As most young people were Superman, Superwoman, were indestructible. And then at some point you realize, oh, my life is finite. I've got to take care of these other things. My health is going to deteriorate. And there are other things that are probably more important. So that was a shift in my life. I had been grinding it out for years. Dad came down with cancer. He got over it. Girlfriend of a long time dumped me. So it was like a dark time. I was like, man, this kind of sucks. So I ended up leaving corporate life, working for myself with a couple business partners, and volunteering on Fridays at the Atlanta Botanical Gardens. Now, pull weeds. That was my thing. Friday mornings, drive down there in an hour worth of traffic. Atlanta traffic is terrible. Hang around with a bunch of plants, and then drive home in the afternoon. And from there, I started learning about time, what was important, having relationships and family, and money wasn't so important anymore. Still was. I mean, you can't get by without it, and you can buy a lot of cool stuff and experiences. And for those who have families, it pays for stuff, but it wasn't the be all end all that I thought it would be. And over the past few years, it's turned into, it's not all about the toys. and the cool stuff. Now it's more about the experiences and the travel. And I've got twin 8-year-olds. So what can I experience with them while they're young? Any parent would say, well, they're not going to be around forever. They're not going to be young forever. And that's true. So I want to have those experiences with them, and money is part of that, which supports it.
Talk a little bit about that, because I think many people are impressed that you became a millionaire at age 35. And I know that there was that transition from working for other people, transitioning to owning different businesses of your own. Mm-hmm. But you say the focus wasn't really on the money.
It was not. I have an IT background, and I was a web person, for a software engineer / web person. And I always worked hard because I liked what I do. Liked what I did, like what I do now too. And I would work 60, 70, 80. I remember my first job coming out of college. My backup plan was to become a bartender because I couldn't get a job. So I went to bartending school. That's another important thing. You should always have a backup plan. I was running out of money after I graduated college because I only had so much saved. And my parents were going to support me. And same dumb mistake. So right out of college, I had a roommate, but we went and bought the most expensive apartment we could in Atlanta because it looked really, really nice. I didn't even have a job yet. He was making enough money at his job that he could sign the lease for the both of us. Luckily, I ended up getting a job 2 miles away. So I was running out of money and got the bartending school as a backup plan, got my job. And then that first Saturday, I was so excited to be able to work. I was in there working. A salary job, just because I didn't want to lose that job. I was worried that something could go south. So I ended up working a lot, and I'm apparently I rambled to the point where I forgot the original question.
You're a hard worker. I was just trying to reconcile like becoming a millionaire at 35, and all the while the focus wasn't really the money.
No, it was just on the work, and because I had such a hard work ethic and I was learning and growing in that regards, I would get bumps in pay. I would get promoted. At another company, they gave me both companies, they gave me like small quantities of stock. It wasn't groundbreaking. It wasn't anything that contributed significantly to achieving that milestone. But I call it the three-legged stool that anyone can achieve. I don't like to discourage people because I was a business owner and that contributed to some of that. It wasn't all of it, because everyone in their mind says, well, I'm not going to be a business owner. I guess I can't do that. It's totally not true. I can actually give you the numbers behind it in a second with a simple example. It's saving. So how much you're going to save, earning, how much you're going to earn, and then investing smartly is the third one. Because if you invest in dumb stuff, and I did that, I lost $40,000 following bad investing advice back in those money moron days. That was most of my retirement savings at the time. That was before age 25. And that's not a good way to go about that. But those three things, that's what the three-legged stool comes from, can grow your wealth at a certain rate. For some people, it's faster. For some people, it's slower. It just depends on what they're doing. And for me, it was, okay, I'm single at the time, later got married. We didn't have kids before we achieved that milestone. We lived with my in-laws for an entire year. My wife was out of work. She went to graduate school. This was 08 and 09, right before the great economic collapse. So she couldn't get a job. We had it in our brains, you know what we'll do? We're in Atlanta. We will move to Texas and we'll stay with your parents. We will stay with them for 2 weeks because that's how long it's going to take you to find a job. And 2 weeks became an entire year of living in their spare bedroom, paying $435 a month for the space to live there. We had no obligations at all at that time. So that entire year, we were able to save 95% of what I was making, and she was doing a little side business. And again, that was just our journey. That's not to say, well, you got to go live with your in-laws and not live off anything for an entire year in order to achieve this millionaire status early on in life. No. What I've done in the past when I share this with people is I use an example of a teacher married to a firefighter. I think I had him saving 7 or 8% of their respective incomes and then getting some type of company match of 3 or 4%. And I think if they did that using just average salaries in the United States, I think it was like 17 years using data from historical stock market returns, they'd have $1 million in the bank. Average salaries, teacher married to a firefighter, 17 years, and a very reasonable amount of savings with some type of match in there. Now, not everybody.
So that's why you say anybody can do this.
Yeah.
You don't have to be a business owner selling a company.
No, totally not. And I find that very encouraging. And that's one of the reasons I put that thing together, because I just wanted to prove to people, because everybody says, no, I mean, I didn't have encouraging parents. I didn't have discouraging parents either. But they certainly weren't the ones that said, you can do anything you want in your life, Scott. They just kind of let me go about my way. And I'm trying to be very intentional with my own kids. And then for the adults that I'm trying to help on this financial independence journey too, we got to break through those mental barriers where they say, well, I can't do it because of X. And I've got thousands of examples and stories and successes, and even that math example I just gave it. Well, you can do it because here's somebody who did, who was in a similar situation. Maybe they didn't live with their in-laws for an entire year, or maybe they didn't wait to have kids, but they did that goal. Maybe it took them a little longer or a little quicker. It just depends, but it can be done.
You wrote one book for children, Money A to Z. What is it that you've been trying to teach your kids, from birth to now they're 8 years old, and they're twins? So this is a good experiment, right? Because I'm assuming it's not a one size fits all. As a parent, you're also trying to pay attention, engage, like what is each child's skill and things that may bring them the contentment that you're talking about, so that you can help guide them in the right direction.
Right. So I've got one boy and one girl, and I wrote Money A to Z. It is a children's book. It's just the basic alphabet of money. And I wrote that for them when they're just turning 4. There wasn't any book on it on the market at the time, which you could read to a child of that age, just to give them a simple vocabulary. And then I knew this awesome artist that I went to high school with who did all the illustrations. Very simple book. I wrote it for them, and at that time, as a parent, you start getting worried. What am I going to teach my kids about money? Because they don't teach it in schools. We know that from growing up. And the few schools that do offer something, it's not enough. I mean, money teaching in school should be much, much broader than it is and more in-depth. So with them, from the various earliest ages, we would have conversations. We would go out. I'd take them to the Home Depot or wherever and hand them the receipts so they could look at it, and they would ask questions like, wow, that's a lot. I had them there. We were at Lowe's last night because I was buying some stuff for a home project, and I gave my daughter the receipt. And she was like, wow, $55 for whatever we bought. That's a lot of money. Is that, yes, that is a lot of money. Here's where that comes from. Here's why we work. We travel, and it can cost this much. And this is the reasons behind that. So I don't say always having conversations, but we're having more than the average family about here's how much stuff costs. Here's how much you can earn doing different things. We have them. They've been working since they were 5, I want to say, at little odds and end jobs, picking up sticks around the yard or washing the car. Good exercises. They don't get allowance. They get paid for doing work, because any responsible adult, when they're older, they're going to have to work, and they're going to have to get a job and get paid. So I wanted to instill those good values in my kids while they're young. Now, it is the ultimate experience. Are they going to turn out to be a bunch of boobs when they're 18 and blow it all? I have no idea. So just trying to hedge my bets right now. Do the best I can.
I don't know how many businesses you've had since you struck out on your own, but what do your current income streams look like today?
Sure. So I've had 9 total companies, some with business partners, some by myself, some with my wife. My parents were not entrepreneurs, and I had never intended to do that. My first one is a couple guys were looking for a web designer. I said, we have no money to pay you, but we'll give you part of the company. I mean, that's how I got started in business, and I kind of liked it. And now I'm kind of spoiled because I work from home and have for almost 20 years. So the idea of going back to working for someone else, why they wouldn't hire me? I'm unhireable at this point. So today we have some rental homes. We purchased those after we had achieved financial independence. I just wanted something to diversify our income and give my wife some projects that she could work on managing the homes. And the other thing, as I coach and help people, I wanted to be able to speak more intelligently on renting homes and renovating homes. Well, the best way to do that is actually go out and do that. So we bought a few. That's one. We just started doing Airbnb with our vacation home. And this August, after we moved out, we moved twice in the past year and a half because of COVID. So that's another income stream. I've got a financial planning business as well. Started that in 2021. And that was a result of, I would get a lot of questions that I wasn't allowed to answer by the law regarding specific investment advice. So I went out and became a registered investment advisor so that I could provide that additional layer of help for those people that are seeking early financial independence. And then we've got our investments as well, which have been growing for nearly 20 years. I mean, that's a ton of compounding. We've had an amazing 10-year run, as most people who have stayed invested over the past 10 years, they didn't get scared in '08 and '09. When you have faith in the system, you stick with it, you can build wealth over the long term. So if we need to pull some money out of there to pay for some stuff, we'll do that as well. My wife does some realtor stuff on the side. Again, it's a lifestyle business for her. She hasn't done much over the past year and a half because, again, we've moved a couple times, so it's been harder. And kids are just starting a new school. So we've got a lot of different income streams, and that comes from a healthy fear of running out of money in 50 years when you start thinking about all the healthcare costs and long-term care costs that get quoted in the media. There's some scary numbers. So I don't like the idea of touching the money that I've accumulated. I'd rather earn more than just live off of savings.
So you're looking for, you have your investments, which can be long-term compound growth. You have the Airbnb or some properties that can generate income. It sounds like good diversification. You're not on one extreme. There are a lot of gurus out there who find one way. And I don't know if it's for branding or if that's just a narrow vision, but they just see one way of doing things. And it sounds like you're willing to try different things.
I try all kinds of stuff. And it's one of the things, as someone who's listened to Clark Howard over the years, the consumer advocate side, I like doing research for people when they have these questions, and it may be a product or a service or this new thing. I invested in a franchise years ago. It face planted, lost it all my money. But I'll try things here and there as long as it's not going to torpedo the long-term plan and see what happens. But I also like simple. Airbnb is simple. Rental homes can be simple. Business is very hard, but I really enjoy what I do. So that's different for different people. Some people are in careers that they really enjoy. Well, if that's your case, awesome. I mean, stick with that for as long as you can until you decide that you want to do something else. I'm not of the mind of thou shalt only invest in real estate and not have a 401k. I think that's really bad advice because later on in life, you may want these other buckets to pull money from that are taxable, tax deferred. I mean, we can get into the crazy math stuff behind this is why you want that, just so you can pay less taxes 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, or have those monies passed down to your next, another generation without the tax hits. Those are important things too. And you're right. The more diversification you have, it all comes down to one thing: choice and opportunity. If you don't have that diversification, you have very little choice. You have very little opportunity to seize an opportunity that might come up that you don't even know about because you haven't been presented with it. When you've got cash, freedom of time and schedule and all these different things, you can seize those and add more joy to life, add more fun, add more money. Who can say? Depends on what it is.
As a business owner who has seen businesses succeed and some have failed, and also as an investor, how do you view risk, or how do you manage risk? And I'm kind of curious, what happened with the franchise business?
Sure. Let's talk on that first before we talk about risk, and they kind of tie in together. There's a movie out there starring Jack Black. It's called The School of Rock. It's one of my favorite movies. But I'm also play music, so I like rock music and all that stuff too. But there's also a franchise out there called School of Rock, and there's, I want to say, about 200 worldwide. And I was a student there. My kids will be students there someday. I think we've got 15 or so locations here in the Dallas area. So I knew a lot about the business, and I knew the owners, and I knew the people that worked there. And so I was in and out of that place for a couple, 3 years. And I just emailed one of the guys one day, say, hey, what's the cost to invest in one of these? And he said, you don't have to work there. You can be an invisible investor, silent investor. You just put cash in, and it might make you some money long term. So I put in 75 grand, enough that it wasn't going to torpedo anything. It was part of that quote unquote fun money. So if I was going to lose it all in something that was high risk, hopefully higher return, it wasn't going to blow up my entire plan. And then it didn't work out. Like 5 or 6 years later, they're like, this location is just trash. So sorry. It's like, okay, I got a tax write-off now, and I got a very valuable lesson and a story that I can share with other people about being a silent investor in a franchise.
I have been to the School of Rock performances, and those kids are incredible.
They're amazing.
We did not have those growing up. So I was in a college band. We're just it's like a garage band, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we sound awful more often than not. And I found that these kids who are going to School of Rock sound incredible because they're actually getting good instruction.
Yeah, they are. And they play some amazing places too. Some of the venues, I was in the adult band, but I played amazing venues that you just don't get the opportunity to play if you're just in a pick-me-up band that plays around and I played in plenty of dive bars too. But so that was the investment that went south. When I'm viewing risk, I'm looking at, here's everything I have to work with. I am willing to put this much money at risk as a portion of it all. And then you start weighing the returns. As an example, all right, if you're a hard money lender, lending to someone who wants to renovate a house, you're probably going to get paid 10 or 12% versus somebody who's going to go into doing a franchise. Maybe they're trying to earn more than that. So I'm looking at that and I'm weighing that against what's the most I could lose. Sometimes it's 100% of it. All right, if I lost all that money, what would it do to the rest of my lifestyle? A little bit, a lot? Would it blow up everything for the rest of my life? I never recommend anybody put your life savings in one thing and then hope it's a good plan. I just don't think that's a good idea because there's too many stories of people who do that and it doesn't work out. All we hear is the successes. If you're reading any of the business magazines, so-and-so and their best friend of 20 years maxed out $150,000 in credit cards to come up with this new seasoning sauce, which got picked up by Costco, and now they're bajillionaires. That's the exception, not the rule.
I really like your common sense approach when it comes to money, when it comes to investing. So many young people today get out of school with a lot of student debt. They're trying to land a job that will pay them enough to start paying that debt down. What do you tell the people that you help as far as debt versus investing and timing? How do you handle that?
I think a great resource, and there's two camps. Do you already have the student loan debt? Well, for people in that camp, you've got a certain amount of money that you have to pay each month. I love the stories of the people who they pick up side jobs and they just put their nose to the grind. Sometimes they tend to be single or haven't started families yet. And they're working 80 or 90 or 100 hours a week to get these debts paid down as soon as possible. And I work those hours early on. It's a great time to do it. And then there's a camp of, well, we haven't gone to college yet. What is the best way to pay for that? And the college scorecard, I think it's collegescorecard.gov. I know it's a government website. It's a great place. You start plugging in numbers and, okay, I want to go to this school located in this state. I want to pick this degree. And I know when I graduate in 4 years, this is the average salary I'm going to make. And it's a pretty good gauge of, all right, if I'm going to drop 200 grand on this fancy private university, but I'm going to come out only making 40 for this underwater basket weaving degree. As a parent, I would say, nope. Nope, don't take out the student loans, and you're not going to get a Parent Plus loan either. Let's rethink that. Why don't we go to community college for a couple years and get the core poetry classes out of the way before moving on to the major degree classes? And then I think I'm just becoming jaded as I get older as a parent. We've been sold such a bill of goods over the past 10 years about thou shalt go to school and get a college education and you shall pay $150,000 for it. And I think, man, if my daughter would get a plumbing, that's not a degree, but become a plumber because of the trades, all the people that are retiring, she'd be a female-owned plumber shop, and we'd call it, I've even got the business name, we'd call it Girl Power Plumbing. And she would just rake in $150 an hour because all of these single women who were afraid to have these people come into their homes and work, they would call her. I mean, that's genius to me. I don't know if I can convince her to be a plumber though. so as I said, I'm kind of jaded these days. If my kids go out and start a business, if they go to trade school, if they go in the military for a few years, I actually would think I'd rather they not go to college the way some of the schools are turning out these useless degrees and saddling students with debt.
Yeah, it sounds like a very practical approach. And it'll be interesting to see what path our children take. And I think, again, it comes down to perception. It's like, what do they want versus what do they think that others' view is, right? It's like, if my son told me that he wants to become an electrician, deep down, I'm like, this is great. He's going to have like an opportunity to build a business. People need his service, and maybe he won't be saddled with $200,000 in debt.
Yeah, he probably making 200 grand out of the gate after he finishes his apprenticeship, which is crazy.
No, exactly.
Oh, I read truck drivers, number one job in America. The average salary for a long haul truck driver is $120,000 a year right now. Truck drivers. That's
it's
insane.
Funny because it goes a little bit back to the beginning of your story where you started. It's like you had the big house, you had a Porsche. People may view you as you succeeded. But today, you're a millionaire, you're a business owner, you have multiple streams of income, but you're walking around in your Metallica shirt, and people have no idea. Like, are Scott and Katie successful? I don't know.
I think it's funny, and I joke about this with people. You can look rich on the outside, and people you don't know might think that's cool. But what's cooler, here's what I'm driving. I have a 2007 Honda Fit. It's got 160,000 miles on it. It's the junkiest car usually when I'm pulling into the Walmart parking lot. And I want people to get to this mindset of, don't pull into the parking lot looking at other people's cars. Pull into the parking lot, in the back of your mind, know you got so much money in the bank, you could go out and buy every single car in that parking lot with a stroke of a check. And that's what's going to bring you a good sense of being in your mind. Not to sound prideful or arrogant, but we should take comfort in knowing that, hey, I've got my financial house together. I don't have to drive that fancy Porsche in order for me to feel good about myself. I know I could go out and buy that if I wanted to, and I'll be content with my 2007 Honda Fit.
It sounds like you want to be the millionaire next door. I know that you've read a lot of personal finance books. What are a couple of your favorites?
Yeah, definitely The Millionaire Next Door. I mean, that one is an eye-opener. I think it's an eye-opener for a lot of people, and it's why it always shows up on the top 10 books of personal finance books. When you realize there's what the media and the advertising world portrays how we should live our lives. And then there's the reality of, if you want to have money, a comfortable retirement, spend more time with the family, sleep better, and these other things, which they don't really have in many commercials, except for the Sleep Number bed, because that's about a good night's sleep. But I digress. Those things, that is how you get by living this. I'm not even going to call it a frugal lifestyle, because frugal gets such a bad rap. It's just an awareness lifestyle. What is important in my life to me about money and where it goes? And for me, obviously, if you're watching the video, it ain't clothes around here in this house, and it ain't cars anymore. I love high style travel with my family. So that's where I divert my money, and I spend less on other important things. And when you can get to that place where you're diverting more money to the more important stuff, it'll bring you more joy. Now, outside of that book, let me think which else is on my bookshelf, which the closet door is closed. I really liked, well, a lot of people say The Boglehead's Guide to Investing. That was one. Opener on beginning investing in index funds and how that all works and the math behind that. And outside of those, I'm trying to think. I have to go way back because it's been a while since I've read some of those classic books. Yeah, that's 1 and 2 right there. If I think of a third one, I will pop it out.
Those are great. I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
I define it this way, and I have for a few years. I get to do what I want, when I want, with who I want, how I want. And I think that wraps into financial independence. I get to, my daughter's not going to be listening to the show. Sometimes I'm an okay parent. My daughter got nominated for Student of the Month. So next week, she's going to go get her award. It doesn't matter the time of day. I get to show up at her award thing in the middle of the day at school because I have the flexibility of schedule to do that, which is cool. And we travel a lot. So going places during off season or off hours when other people aren't there just to avoid the crowds is a lot of fun. That's with when I want, who I want. So if we want to go travel we usually haul along my mother-in-law as an extra set of hands wherever we go. Take her on our vacations with us and just cool things like that. Being able, and there's a huge portion of this is being generous. Time, money, talents, whatever it happens to be. A situation crops up. Somebody needs something. Here's a great example. The football coach for my kids' football team, the head coach, he came down with COVID pneumonia on Christmas Day. And he's in the hospital right now as we're recording this, trying to recover. So the wife sent out the situation to our group text, and my wife was like, I am going to Costco right now or the grocery stores, and I'm going to go buy a bunch of food, and I'm going to bring it over to them and give it to the neighbors so they can have it. So stuff like that, when that crops up and you can just drop a hat and go help out somebody, I mean, that's way cooler than a lot of useless stuff that's going to end up in a landfill someday or donated.
I love the definition of winning. And we'll say a prayer for your kids' football coach.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, both personal and professional, with us all and inspiring us. Tell the Inspired Money Makers where to follow you. You have a great show, the Scott Alan Turner Show, Financial Rockstar. Tell them where to follow you and get more.
Sure. My website is scottallenturner.com. And you can contact me on there. It's got my social channels. And yes, please check out my show, Financial Rockstar. There's lots of bad singing on it. Sometimes you might actually learn something. Not usually. It's it's a trip.
Yeah, and some ripping guitar playing.
Yes.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Andy. I enjoyed it.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? I love Scott's no-nonsense, common-sense approach to money. My favorite moment is the way Clark Howard's radio show completely changed Scott's perspectives on money and his definition of wealth. It's really inspiring how Scott took action right away, selling his much-loved Porsche. Kudos to him for also staying the course. I want you to think about what brings you happiness. See if you can reverse engineer your debt, savings, and investments to be happy now and in the future. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment, let me know by posting a comment below. Thanks for watching to the end. Sign up to get our email that goes out every 2 weeks. The Runnymede investment team highlights data, news, and events that we think are worth sharing. Subscribe at inspiredmoney.fm/newsletter. It's free and informative. Thank you so much for joining me on this mission. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.